Our life is never going to be free of trauma. Our lives are always going to have some pain points in them. As a matter of fact, Fred Rogers said that there's no normal life that's free of pain. It's in the very wrestling with our problems that can be the impetus for growth. However, in our problems or in our traumas, it gives us triggers. Like there's trigger points where there's like massive pain. You experience something, and sometimes a smell can be a trigger, sometimes a sight can be a trigger, sometimes a taste, whatever it is, those senses that then trigger those traumas that are seated within us. Oftentimes are the things that when people are going through post-traumatic symptoms, it's what we're trying to avoid. Like just avoid the trigger. Don't listen to that song that causes that painful memory. Don't smell or eat whatever it is that causes it to come back. And I think it's actually doing us harm because inside of those triggers, it actually pinpoints the greatest opportunity for growth. I think that as we begin to see the triggers, or feel the triggers, we should identify the triggers and then find out what it is that we need to do in order to dive into those traumas. As I've researched trauma, what I know is that trauma is either a catalyst for growth or a catalyst for a sealing or a new identity in our lives. There's really 5 ways that we can facilitate trauma in our lives and actually make it profitable for us. Find the catalyst for growth. First way is education. Education is like rethinking our world. It's rethinking our events. It's rethinking our future. As you begin to feel the trigger of something that happened, could you ever imagine through educating your mind, educating your situation, that could actually create some new opportunity? So education is the first step. The second step is what's called emotional regulation, managing our negative emotions and reflecting on successes and possibilities. So instead of always allowing a trigger to create a backward look, it's through emotional regulation. It's retooling that trigger to allow it to potentially create the opportunity in the future, the possibility side. I was reading a book recently where a lady had lost her husband overseas. He was in the military, and she said, this song that she would hear would constantly bring back the thoughts of everything that she had lost. But as she referenced what the song was, it was a song that was all about positivity and hope. And so it's a retooling. It's through emotional regulation, thinking about what the future possibilities could actually be. Thirdly, it's about disclosure, right? Disclosure is another step. It's the third step. And disclosure is all about actually diving into what the trigger does for you and speaking to it. Do you have a safe place or a safe person that you can speak these things to? I think that's why the therapists are so in demand today, because people just need a safe space where they know that whatever they're speaking about, it's okay to speak about, and it's not going to go anywhere else. Do you have a safe place for full disclosure? So to go back, it's like it can be facilitated in 3 ways: education, emotional regulation, disclosure. Next would be narrative development, shaping the story of trauma and deriving hope from famous stories. So it's like thinking about others and creating a new narrative. This person experienced the same thing that I experienced. However, they found success through that experience. And then lastly, service. It's finding work that ultimately benefits others through the trigger, right? So like when something triggers you, it's like, is there an act of service that can be given or donated or executed on so that now I can turn this trigger into a feeling impact? Because ultimately impact is what creates the greatest weight on fulfillment and joy in our lives, when we can create impact on others' lives. And so I read all of that in a book by Tedeschi, and he gives those five pieces. And I think that, while I think his book was intended for those who have gone through trauma or maybe even PTSD to begin to deal with it in those 5 ways, I see is that some of us don't have some massive trauma like the death of a loved one, or, we haven't been to war and we haven't experienced casualties, the loss of friends, but we have something simple like business failed, or a relationship we had fail, or there's a lot of other just failures along the pathway that seats inside of us these ceilings in our subconscious, and then the triggers actually help us, like it like causes a wince, and then we kind of resist the pain, and so we go the opposite way, as opposed to saying, okay, that hurts, and how am I going to deal with it? And I feel like Tedeschi's book on this really helps us understand there's really 5 ways that we can begin to deal with this and start stepping into allowing our triggers become a trajectory for growth, not this place of retreat and avoidance.
With that, first thing that comes to my mind is the parallels you can draw between emotional growth with trauma in regards to trauma and physical growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's like building muscles and working out.
Right.
I went to a physical therapist once when I had an injury in my back. She explained to me what's happening is your back has sustained this injury. It's not in your bones, it's in your muscle.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is it's trying to protect itself, so it stops,
Mm-hmm.
clenches up,
Right.
winces, and the worse that gets, the worse your injury gets. And so you need to stop and apply these principles
Sure.
to walk back.
I think it's so important too, because it's like, just like you gave the illustration of it wasn't the bone in your back that was actually affected. It was the muscle. It was everything that was protecting it, right? It was clinching up and it was resisting it. What is interesting is in the human condition, as we feel triggers, it's not the song or the smell or the taste that really is affecting you. It's a protectant. It's a measurement where your brain identifies like, ooh, I don't want to step back into that because it's painful. What it does is the problem. It's like in your back, the problem then reaches into all areas, right? Like then your back goes down your arm, it goes into your leg. What happens is it actually has an ancillary effect into other areas of our lives, right? And so we have a trauma in our life that creates a trigger when some emotion is felt. And then it actually begins to affect everything around it. It's not just the issue itself, it's everything touching the issue. It's a person who has failed in business. And so therefore they start again and they create a business, and something triggers them to the past. Like, oh no, I'm going to lose everything again. And so then they resist, well, maybe I should be careful on who I hire, how much money I should spend, or maybe I should reserve so much capital, or maybe I should play it safe over here. And all of a sudden, it's like this big giant circle around the actual issue that affects so much more than the issue itself. But again, you go back, it's like, how do you work back through that? One of the big ones was education. Why did your business fail? It might have just been a product of the environment, the economic situation around you, service, whatever it was. It probably had nothing to do with the people you hired, how you spent your money, but all of a sudden it's because of that one thing. It creates a trigger, an emotional pinch point that then affects everything else around us because it's all tied to it.
It seems like you list of specific things you're trying to deal with, but they all tie back to one broader principle.
Right.
Is there a way you employ or you've seen or you've learned that helps you identify what the actual trauma is?
Yeah, I think that you have to keep asking why over and over and over again. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Because if it's like most of our traumas are 6, 7, 8 layers deep. It has nothing to do with like this word experience. It has to do with like, but why is that experience happening? Okay, well, why is that experience happening? Well, why is that experience happening? It's like, and it goes all the way back down to this root place where I think that we need to be dissatisfied until we understand what the root of the problem is. I think that, in my own life, and I think that should at least consider that when there is a trigger, we first have to identify it, right? Like when there's something that bothers me or something that triggers, it's like, well, what is it? Like, what is that trigger and what is it tying to? Then I think we have to be dissatisfied until we actually believe that we've gotten to the root of the problem, right? And so that there's a mechanism per se that just helps you navigate right to it. I think that it's a lot of self-searching. I think it's a lot of reflection. I think it's a lot of looking back into our past. And oftentimes, you need someone else who has a broader perspective than your own, right? Like there's somebody in my life that I go to when I hit one of these pinch points. Help me deal with it. Help me see what I'm not seeing. You got to have somebody honest in your life. Everyone deserves at least one truly honest person in their life that they can go to are not going to flare up emotionally, are going to sit there pragmatically and just go, well, have you thought of this? What about this? Does it tie to this? Have you ever thought that maybe this over here actually ties to this over here? And, for me, I have that person in my life that I go to on a regular basis. We have monthly, regularly scheduled calls because, again, our traumas can oftentimes cause resistance towards what we ultimately want in life. And instead of working so hard on just trying to get where we want to go, oftentimes we just have to work hard at pulling off the resistance. The human condition is so amazing, right? Like the human mind is so resilient and powerful. I can tell you how many times I've had a problem that I couldn't solve, that while I'm sleeping, I actually solve it in my sleep and wake up with that's happened to me dozens of times. And it's because our minds are so resilient and powerful, that they're completely untapped. And sometimes it's more about, if you want to get to where you ultimately want to go, oftentimes it's not about just chasing harder or doing more. Oftentimes it's about going backwards to go forwards. It's what is actually preventing us from getting there, because, our human capacity is so much greater than what we're achieving today. And if you believe that, then you must look at the resistant points versus the trajectory points.
So asking, how do we identify, how do you trace back those factors that ultimately tie to trauma? And you said look within or have a person there who can help you introspect. This is someone who's like really in the world, really on the internet, music, podcast, videos, streaming services. I think especially today, everything is designed to kind of turn your brain off, disconnect you.
Correct.
And I think introspection, meditation, prayer is just gone.
Yeah.
And it did serve a purpose, and we have a big disconnection with that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a massive disconnection with that. Reading recently where it was stated that one of the great human fears is being alone and alone with our thoughts, because today everything is built to allow us to push off those thoughts. If you want a distraction, it's there every second of every day. I think you go back 50, 60 years ago, there was so few distractions. We didn't have cell phones and social media and all of that. And there's so many distractions that actually, I think, hold us inside of those trauma points, right? We can't, unless it's intentional, you never sit there and actually dwell in it. And when we need to dwell in that. We need to dissect it because, again, I really believe that most of what is preventing us from what we ultimately want is the resistant points, not our abilities, right? We all have abilities that would allow us greater growth than we currently have. Very few people have actually reached the pinnacle of who they are. And so what is pulling them back? It's those resistant points. And it's like, I think the only way that you get there is introspection. And I think, like you said, it is prayer, it is meditation, it is self-awareness and self-time. We rarely get today. We commute together, we work together, we collaborate together. It's like everything is so connected that we never really get to disconnect and experience those things. It has to be intentional. Finding
the right person you can trust, who you said isn't going to emotionally flare up, who you can be open with. I feel like that won't be easy for a lot of people because it's hard to take criticism.
Right.
I think that is a muscle you have to work out. Is
right.
Like being willing to, maybe I am the problem. Any experiences or thoughts or like?
Yeah, I think that's I think that getting to a place where you're willing and open to allow someone else to be open and honest with you, I think is the first step, right? Like you can't just expect someone to do it for you without an open, willing spirit to receive it. So I feel like the first work has to be done with you. Like, are you truly willing to accept another's scoping and probing into your life and into your mind to dissect down what is the root of some of this? And I don't think it has to be a therapist. I don't think it has to be. Sometimes it's just a person that's just a step beyond us that doesn't need our approval, that has nothing to gain from us. And I think that those are the big criteria points that have to be present, because if that person has anything to gain from us, all of a sudden it begins to, becomes a very biased conversation. If the person isn't at least experienced from a position like past us, then they really have a hard time looking forward, but it's a whole lot easier to look back, right? Like hindsight's 2020. So give your mentor the chance to have 2020 vision on what you're doing, right? And those criteria is so important because then it allows you the safe space. But I think it's our responsibility first to determine if we're willing and open. And I think it's a submission. I think it's a full-on submission of control, ego, arrogance, all of those things, which again, it goes back to self-regulation. One of the 5 was regulation, and we have to be able to do that in order to receive truth. Then you have to find somebody who won't be flared up by your frustrations, who won't be flared up by your issues. And typically that's an experienced person who's been there before you are. They have a level of maturity. They have nothing to gain by who you are or what you can give them. And so it's difficult. I think this is where a lot of parents go wrong. Look to their children for advice, even their younger, even their older children, like a child that's been through college or something like that. While their advice is very, very valid, they're coming from a perspective of looking forward versus looking in the rear view. And looking in the rear view is always a better vantage point, right? Like it's like someone who's looking backwards on a life that's already been, that has been experienced, has a vantage point that cannot be exchanged for anything else. Yeah, I think that part of the experience is we have to give ourselves to it emotionally. And when we receive it from someone else, I think it's the pay it forward method. I think we have to be willing to then pay it back to someone else. I think it's this long line of experience and maturity. And I feel like it's our responsibility then to look back. For me in my 40s to take super strong business advice from somebody in their 70s or 80s that are maybe in the twilight of their career, but one step ahead of me, somebody in their 50s that have experienced maybe a little bit more than I have, or maybe they've raised their children, they've got great children, or they've got a great, relationship or whatever, can then look back on, my life. And there's a comparison there. For me in my 40s, like somebody in their late 20s or early 30s, they're just coming into business or, just experiencing their first level of success, or maybe they're just starting to have children. It's like my vantage point is a good vantage point for them. It's like, I always felt like between me and my sons, there should be someone about midway point that I could rely on. There was a young man who worked for me for quite a few years. Sons really looked up to him. And so I would use him in that role. Like, hey, would you be willing to just spend a little bit of time with my son and, kind of help him get perspective? And then I would coach my son and like, this young guy's got it together. He's sharp. He's probably what you want to be in life. What if you gave yourself to his opinions, right? And so like, I always try to even cultivate it for my own kids, because I felt like from me, I may be too far removed to have the same impact, on them that someone that's a little closer to their age or more, their maturity level could help with.
It's the cool uncle.
Yeah.
It's like,
absolutely.
Your parents will tell you one thing, cool uncle will say the same thing. And you're like, that's right.
Exactly right.
Now that I've listed out my triggers, it's like, what do I do now?
Right.
And you gave us those 5 things. Can we kind of dive into each of those 5?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I think, as I look at those 5, the first one is education. It's rethinking ourselves, our world, our future. And sometimes I feel like these, like I listen to what he wrote, and I feel like to some degree in my own life, it's a little out of order, right? Like I feel like, his was emotional regulation, then he went to disclosure. I feel like until I go from disclosure, it's like, I feel like I have to identify what it is, right? Like this thing really bothers me. Every time this happens, it sets off this emotional response in me. And I feel like I have to like speak it, say it, disclose it. I feel like education then steps in, right? Then for me, it's more about education. It's like, okay, what is it? What's causing it? It's then it's the reshaping, right? Like, and then that's where perspective is so great. This is, the guy that I speak to on a regular basis. I'll say, hey, this really bothers me sometime. It causes these feelings and thoughts and emotions. And from my perspective, this is why. And then I feel like what he does is then he starts helping reshape the educational process, right? Because then when I actually start thinking about what it really is, It's like one of the big reshaping concepts or ideas. Most people that hurt people do not do it intentionally to hurt someone. They're actually doing it as an emotional response or lack in their own lives, right? Like most people don't intentionally hurt people. What they do is there's something wrong in their own life, and the byproduct of something not being dealt with in their life ends up, cascading over into someone else. When you can start looking at people individually or individualized, it's like, and realize like their hurts cause them pain, and sometimes their hurts cause me pain, then what it does is it doesn't like, then it helps me re-educate myself to say, well, there wasn't something wrong with me that caused this problem. There was something wrong with them that caused this problem, right? And I think that that's a lot of what we talk about is like, what is the educational process? Like, what is it? Did I do something wrong and that's why I'm in this position? Was it me or was it someone else, right? Did I make a bad choice or did someone else make a bad choice, right? And I think it goes into emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is managing our negative emotions and reflecting on the successes and possibilities, right? So once I educate myself, then I can actually like the emotions around that. Well, if that person didn't intentionally hurt me, then what's possible if I just allow them to be in a position of wrong, but I wasn't? Well, if I was in a position of wrong, what could I have done to change it? Well, probably nothing, especially, if some people were in very hopeless situations. It wasn't their fault. They were taken advantage of. They were hurt. Then you get to a place where you can process. And so then you can begin to emotionally regulate, right? Like, okay, it's not me. I'm not at fault. I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with me that caused this. Then I think it steps into what he calls narrative development. Development, then what it allows me to do is then to rewrite the story, to begin to tell myself what the story actually is, and when you recreate the right narrative, it allows you to shape the story of trauma, and then instead of trauma bringing a negative effect on your life, it allows you to actually then create hope in your life, right? And talk about the loss of my sister and how my mother helped me deal with it with gratitude. What my mom was doing was she was reshaping my narrative. She was helping me see that if I could find the moments in my sister and I's life that really impacted me in a positive way, and I could dwell there, then my narrative wasn't, it's all about what I lost, but it was about what I gained. And I feel like if you deal with traumas in the proper way, you can get to the place where, and this is very difficult, but I think any trauma can bring some positive in our life. That's a very sensitive statement, because I realize that what I'm saying isn't just the loss of a loved one. It's people that have been affected in horrific ways. So I want to be very sensitive with that statement, but I mean that statement because I have seen out of some of the greatest people on the planet. I saw a lady in the Middle East who her face was burned with acid because she didn't believe or act the way that people surrounding her believed that she should think or act. And I watched her give one of the most amazing speeches. Her face was so disfigured. And she began to tell how she believed that she was a better person today for the trauma that she went through than she was before the trauma. And that's where I it's like, I think that any trauma, no matter how horrific it is, can be shaped into something positive. You think about the people that have been on our Aspire stage, the one I think about is Nick, who has one arm, no legs, no other limb, one finger on his one arm. And the guy surfs and skateboards and races cars, and he's resilient. He'll tell you that he believes that trauma in his life is what's now given him a platform to make such massive impact for others. So I say it with sensitivity, but I believe it wholeheartedly. And then lastly, it's service, which is, my big focus in life, which is if in your traumas, you can find grace and hope and gratitude and get to a place where you can find the benefit, the positive, that then you can turn around with intent to others that have the same exact issue and begin to serve. And in serving somebody with the same trauma you've gone through, there is a joy and a fulfillment that cannot be matched.
I have a question. I know you touched on it. It's a sensitive part of stating that all trauma could potentially bring good. I think the key in that is to not compare, because trauma is different for everyone.
Right.
It's not to, and then like not to judge people who may not have found the good yet, but it is possible. And that's a narrative of hope. And I think that's a better way to look at it. So
I agree. I think that, someone who's gone through trauma of any kind, we all have to recognize that no trauma is the same. And how I experience it in my worldview, my experience is radically different than, situationally, maybe the exact same as my neighbor, but my experience of it is completely different. You think about like siblings who their parents go through some issue like divorce. One comes out better and one comes out struggling worse. It's in our experience of that trauma that makes it unique. And so while some people may have found the silver lining, they may have found the hope and the opportunity in whatever they've gone through, you can't look back at someone else and say, well, you should too, right? Like everybody's own unique journey is so unique to them that we have to allow people the space and the grace and the opportunity to find that promise, that opportunity, that hope in whatever they've gone through with extreme grace. Like people are hurting and every person in the world has gone through something. But again, it goes back to, I think that pain, conflict, trauma is the greatest catalyst for growth in the human experience. And we have to allow people to do that, to do just that, have a human experience, not expect them to have my human experience, but their human experience. I want to say the right thing when someone else is hurting, and we want to, like deliver like this silver bullet that solves all problems and makes them feel a million times better. Because human suffering, while the person suffering, it's difficult for, it's also difficult for every other person because there's a helplessness in watching someone suffer. You can't go through it, and especially if it's a child or someone that you love, to watch them suffer. All you want to do is take it away from them. All you want to do is put yourself in there. But sometimes in trying to put ourselves in there, we say the wrong things. We come up with the wrong expression. And having lost both a sister and a brother, and had quite a bit of loss in my life, standing at the casket of my brother's funeral, someone said to me, because he had been struggling with health, he's better off now. And it's just like, and all they wanted to do was say like, he's not suffering, he's in a good place, but man, it's like that close to hurt. It's just like, it just digs the pain deeper, and they don't mean it. They don't intentionally, they're wanting to give you some sort of solace, but sometimes we just have to give people space and grace, right? Like we have to give them something that maybe they don't even deserve. Maybe you have gone through an even worse trauma or traumatic situation, but in the end, it's like we got to find a way to give them that gift to be present in their lives, be allowing of the space that they need to go through whatever grieving process or whatever hurting they need to go through with full support. It's like, I think the best thing that someone has ever said to me in that place of struggle is, I support you. I'm here for you. I love you. Like those are words that allow that space. The person that is experiencing the trauma, they're the ones that have to ascribe meaning to it. You can't ascribe meaning to their hurt. You can't step in and go, let me tell you how they have to come to that, right? And you have to give them the space and the support to do it. I oftentimes find that someone trying to teach me a lesson never works, but experiencing a lesson third party always seems to work. Like, oh, well, I watched them go through that over there, and maybe that could be my experience. So oftentimes you have to remove yourself from it, because first person teaching oftentimes is not well received. Someone, a book, I went through another crazy situation in my life, and someone just said, hey, I know somebody else that went through this same situation and wrote a book about it. I just thought of you. I thought maybe, I don't know if it's good or not, but here, just thought of you, maybe it'll help. That book and that moment was like life to me. I remember reading it on a plane and just like trying to keep it together, because it's like, okay, because I was learning the lesson from a third party perspective, it wasn't, and by proxy, the person who gave it to me actually helped teach me the lesson. But had they actually said the lesson in the book to me, I probably would have rejected it.
Learning third party, is that part of narrative development?
I think that's 100% narrative development, because in narrative development, recreating the story around the why, not the how. We know how we got hurt. We know how we experienced trauma, but the why, right? Like, what's the bigger picture? What's the greater purpose? What's the real meaning and opportunity here? I think sometimes, assisting in that from a third party is helpful,
You familiar with Brene Brown?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which one, but she talks about the story I'm telling myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that struck so deep inside me, because I can tell really good stories.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I caught myself doing it to myself the worst.
Yeah.
And so that for me is the most important part of narrative development, is like,
oh yeah,
okay, what if they are just having an off day and it's not personal? And
right. Yeah. What if, when we do conflict resolution at work, we use a portion of Brene Brown's piece in our conflict resolution. And instead of saying, this is what I think you're doing, you change that in the experience, and you say, this is the story I'm telling myself. I may not be accurate. And then it gives you the space, right, to allow for the resolution to happen. Yeah, it's a brilliant way to communicate.
Yeah. I think
both with yourself and with others.
True. And then in narrative development, look for those third-party examples.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate example of suffering is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it's a universal figure. Everyone can narrative. He literally went through what we all went through.
Yeah.
So who better to help you in that moment?
Yeah, I think from a faith perspective, I think Jesus Christ is actually, to me, the central figure in that, right? Because, even the Bible talks about he who had no sin became sin for us. That's the Bible narrative. And what he's saying is he didn't have to suffer. He chose to suffer, and he chose to suffer to better you and I. And I think that's a whole different level, right? We suffer, and oftentimes we suffer as a byproduct of someone's poor choices, someone else or our own. A place where you're willing to sacrifice and suffer for someone else. It's also the biblical narrative of what love is, right? The ultimate sacrifice, sacrificing on behalf of another without an expectation in return. That's a whole deeper level. I do believe that the most important out of the 5 is service. And the reason is because I think sometimes we superficially try to solve our traumas. We'll try to give ourselves a different narrative. We'll try to our feelings, our emotions. We try to create different experiences with those triggers. That trigger pinpoints exactly where the issue is. Every time you're triggered, that's the issue for potential growth. However, until you get to 5, which is, am I actually willing to serve someone else who's gone through the same thing? I think that it has the potential of being superficial and not real. I think the ultimate test of whether that trigger is now creating, trajectory for growth is whether or not we're willing to serve someone else that's in the same situation. Because in serving someone else in the same situation, it's going to do one of two things. Number one, it's going to bring back the trigger, right? It's going to be it's the back pain, it's the clenching, it's the emotional response. Or there's emotional release, and there's now joy and fulfillment found in the moment. If you can serve someone else that's gone through the exact same issue you've been through, or at least in close proximity to it, and do it while feeling joy and fulfillment, now you're beginning to master the trauma that has before held you in captive. Thanks so much for being a part of the podcast and for listening today. I'd love to connect with you further, and you can connect with me on social media at Eddie Wilson Official on any of the social media channels.